Good morning. My name is Gavin Lawson from Odyssey AVE. AVE stands for Audio Visual Entrainment. And I've been working for the last 7 years on using various modalities to support the creative sector. So the idea is that we can use the existing technologies within Ableton Live to create ways for mental well-being that support not just the artists themselves, but their management team. And this is a presentation that I'll take you through on how I discovered those modalities. I think it's really nice to start with this. Music uniquely among the arts is both completely abstract and profoundly emotional. It has no power to represent anything particular or external, but it has unique power to express inner states or feelings. I've been in the electronic music industry for over 30 years, and I suffered with some stress about 10 years ago, and I decided to look into well-being and electronic music as a model for well-being. So I think it sets the tone with that wonderful quote from Sachs. So in my paper, the focus was on electronic music and stroboscopic light technology. It was to explore the creative process as a tool set for improving mental well-being and to invest in the investigation of sonified data, binaural spatial audio, and altered states of consciousness. Essentially, music from the mind, for the mind. So this is stacking modalities, enhancing creativity, stress relief, and emotional expression. So let's look at the psychosocial characteristics of what happens in the electronic music industry. There's pressure, there's mental health challenges faced. And this goes right across the music industry, but because of this paper, I narrowed it down to electronic music, and there is a need for a new approach to support the sector. These are just some of the detrimental effects that come from working within this industry, and very sadly, we lost this man in this picture. Avicii was another, and personally, I lost a friend 2 years ago because, again, this wonderful array of things that can happen when we work in this sector. So this is from Mind, a guide to mental health in the electronic music sector, and it's a really nice infographic around how we can spot these and how the music industry can support the industry. And what I've been working on is, why don't we do it ourselves? Why don't we use this technology creatively to support our own mental health, then create music that we can then put out into the public domain to support it in a larger audience. So the idea was looking for the link between sound and mindful practice for the purpose of task-positive creativity, supporting artists, performers, and industry professionals. I spoke about this in 2019 at Question Session in Glasgow, and then I ran 3 music production wellbeing retreats in Ibiza, where we used yoga and meditation, plant-based food, and 5 days of training with Ableton Live. And what we noticed by the 3rd day on all 3 retreats was their expressiveness and creativity was 4-fold. So usually when I was teaching in the past, you'd see people kind of staring at the strip lights and not really paying much attention. But once we introduced these wellness modalities, we actually saw that there was much more engagement within all the students, and this went over 30 students over 3 retreats. So I wrote a book. I put this book out for free in the lockdown because I felt that people would benefit from it, but being isolated in their homes, which was yoga, meditation, cardio fitness, nutrition, breathwork, plant-based food, foraging, coffee, and cacao. And this is free on my website, so feel free to download it. And the idea here is it's more of a tool set for you to support your creative. So the book is called Creativity. So then I started to work with sound, light, and vibration, and this is Funkadelica and Ibiza, Cosmic Pineapple at Pikes, and Six Senses, where I worked for 6 months, supporting the guests with stroboscopic light and sound, And I saw a really profound change in the people that were experiencing this. So much so, because I come from a musical background, I decided to work with these musicians. Each one of these musicians had 10 sessions with the stroboscopic light, the Roxiva lamp, and spatialized sound in headphones and vibration on the spine from the sub-pack. This is their feedback from the experiences. Now, all of them had suffered because of the lockdown and were nervous about going back out into the public domain to perform. They were all very nervous to go back out into the public domain. So my favourite was George. George had to perform at Glastonbury in 2022, and he'd been at home in the lockdown, and he was really concerned that actually it was a struggle for him to go and perform again. 10 sessions with a lamp. I highly suggest you watch his Glastonbury performance because he's so invigorated on stage. And this is down to this work with stroboscopic light vibration and sound. So much so I was featured in DJ Magazine about it. And this was a couple of years ago. And I'm really proud of that because at least it gets it into the public domain and it gets people to realise that actually these technologies are really our supporting role. So I love this quote from White Mirror, which is Tom Middleton's company in London, and it's in the words of wellness, a paradigm shift is underway, one that bridges the gap between arts, sciences and well-being. And this is where we're starting to see more companies, more institutions. I was at Warner Music yesterday that have very much taken an interest in how we can use sound, light and vibration. So the tool set. So let's start with the tools that I use to create these experiences. So this is a Max for Life suite by Manifest Audio, which allows me to take real world data from CSV files and translate it into music. So this is called musication. So it's from the data realm to the sonic realm. And the idea is we can take this data and use these wonderful plugins to turn it into music. So I'm going to show you a slide in a second which really puts this into perspective. This is the wonderful work by Milton Manikides, who is a lecturer at Gresham, and his book, Hidden Music, is a must-read, which is a Cambridge Press book. He has made this wonderful infogram on the sonic realm and the data realm. And I've used this extensively in my work. It's a really good way to look at what's happening in our acoustic and data realms, and the empirical, how we take this empirical data and take this abstracted simulation data and translate it into music. It's absolutely fantastic, and I'll show you why. Here we have mononucleotide sequence, ACGT, and I've translated it using ChatGPT into F-sharp minor pentatonic scale. From that, I've written a piece of music called DNA, which I use I've been using with musicians. So basically, I've been taking what is a mononucleotide DNA sequence, translated it into F-sharp minor pentatonic, and then using Mario Reynolds' tuning system 1 and 2 in real time and shifting between both scales. What you can see happening here is a way of us expressing ourselves creatively to minimize our stress. So it's not necessarily about Spotify plays at 0.006 pence a play, or the impending, which I've framed quite nicely, I think, which is sonic prompting, which means that music is made by text, which is soulless and totally destructive. But when it comes to mental health, no machine can create this, but we can use the benefits of the machine to help and support us create these wonderful translations from data over into the sonic world. So I performed this at the Museum of Consciousness. I'll go into that in a second. I performed this at the Museum of Consciousness at Oxford University for Carl. And one of the audience members said, I felt like there was something happening to me inside. So take from that what you will, but it's the beautiful thing about sonifying real-world data. Spatialization, also a massive part of my work, which is to use spatial audio in binaural stereo. There's a company in France called Aircam. They've been working on spatialization since 1991, and this is their series of plugins. The wonderful thing about this is it works in any headphones. So you're creating a virtual world within the head while you're under the stroboscopic lamp and feeling the vibration on your spine. This leads to very profound experiences, which then lead to the benefits from our mental health. This is the reason I've put this slide in is because this is a free set of plugins that you have to buy the AirCam plugins I just showed you. But this is a free set. They're called Envelope for Life. It's a company in America who have this beautiful spatialized space, and they've created this series of Max for Life plugins, which are free to download, and they work just as well as the AirCam plugins. And I thought it was fair to represent them just as much as these from AirCam. So there was a lot of conversation, as you can imagine, around this, and I spoke to a wonderful company in America called Odyssey, and they make these headphones. So the planar magnetic technology, they are really accurate, and they go down to 10 hertz, up to 24 kilohertz. And in order to give people the best experience, you want the best quality. There's something that represents the real world. So I had a great conversation with this is Chris from Odyssey, and so much so I now use these headphones all the time. They are super accurate, and they really make the experience feel like you're in a spatialized environment. Then I was featured on their website. I think this is a great quote from Colin. Outside pure music listening, there are obviously applications, yada, 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 but I feel it's worth considering a more nuanced approach and ultimately use case that is spatial audio for well-being. So again, it's as you discover these things, you realise that they're being discovered elsewhere as well and being written about. And obviously the approach is to get electronic music producers to use these technologies and then create concepts that work for well-being. So the practicality of well-being this is where it started. When you go under stroboscopic light, you see what's called entoptic geometry. These are the various shapes that are formed based on frequencies. So we know that this is a very simplified version of the brainwave states, delta, theta, alpha, low delta, SMR, high beta, and gamma. They're pretty accurate, and we have these experiences with stroboscopic light and sound, and I use isochronic tones to entrain the brain, and the outcomes are amazing. I mean, we're really seeing less self-critical analysis, we're seeing reductions in stress. So if we can catch stress when it's at the acute stage, musicians are less likely to go into chronic stress, which then leads to anxiety and depression. I've built this just recently to support the concept, which is the modes, the musical modes, the frequencies, the brainwave states, the effects, the audiovisual entrainment, and this is what I'm going to use to support musicians when I write a book that allows what I've been speaking today about. And you can see here, these are the potential outcomes on the outer edge, and on the inner edge is what musicians can use based on frequencies and the musical modes. Colour representation during stroboscopic light experience is really important. So it's really important to look at it from a synesthesia perspective, because with eyes closed, there's as much as there's geometry, which is the entoptic hallucinations, there's also a lot of colour. And to look at these colours based on our state of mind is really important, because when you ask people that have had these experiences what colours they see, it's really interesting. They seem to be more like someone who's got synesthesia behind closed eyes than what it is to be a non-synesthetic. This is a modal compass for the musical modes and the frequencies of colour. Again, it's very subjective, but it seems to be quite accurate when you ask people about their experiences and their state of mind. So the consciousness augmentation here is to the use of the Roxeva RX1 enabled in life for exploring these altered states of consciousness and developing a new Max for Live device, which we've just finished on Thursday, which I'll show you in a sec. So I decided to say that because I was getting such amazing feedback from these clients, I'm going to do this for myself. So I recorded my brainwave data, and you can see in the back here, I mean, you can see this as well. Look at the amount of activity in delta. Right, so but basically, and I've also got someone else who's got one of these heart math rings, and they're asleep as far as their heart rate variability suggests during the experiences. It says they're asleep, and they're not. They're fully conscious. So you can actually also see there's activity in gamma. When they did EEG readings on Tibetan Buddhist monks, they were high gamma, high delta. So the correlation between both studies is really interesting. So I used this to make an album. So I put the album together, and then I performed it at Museum of Consciousness. I was sat right there and performed this for Carl, with a wonderful group of people who are using sound as a modality to support our mental health. So I suggest that this is a flicker for change. And this is an opportunity for musicians who are more than likely going to be eaten up by AI to move over into the well-being sector and use their skills in music to support people with mental health issues. This was the album that I produced that came out in April, and I wrote 75 tracks in 2 years using this methodology, which previous to using these techniques, I would write 3 or 4 tracks a year that I was happy with. So it's exponential in its benefits. This was the feedback from the album, which was great. I don't think I'd ever seen so many stars before in any of my music, so it was really exciting to receive that. And this is a plugin I've developed with Phelan Kane, who's an MSc in computer science in Berlin. And this will allow musicians to work in Logic and in Ableton with an audio unit and a VST plugin to control the Roxiva lamp for real time. So this will allow to open it up to work in spaces with multiple people. And we estimate you could have up to 124 people in a session at a time. So this is changing the dynamic of the nightclub environment with flashing lights and music to a mental health environment. And you can see here, we've been testing it on groups. There's been research done in the United States. You can see, as a practitioner, there's benefits. And I wrote this for the paper, and I think it kind of sums up what I've been trying to say to you today. I subscribe to the eloquence of Plato's moral law. Gaze to the mind, flight to the imagination. I gestalt, if you may, when one feels complete in the frequencies and tones of musical composition, synchronized to the rhythms of flicker light and creativity as a whole. And this is the work that I've been doing. There you have your client, real-time music, and real-time flicker change. So this takes the dynamic of what we've been doing in electronic music and completely shifts it. I was very inspired by the Dream Machine that toured the UK with over 1 million people and 6,000 participants, which is 6,000 of those participants is now the biggest consensus ever written in the UK, which is about perception. And these are the artworks that were created at the Dream Machine. Now, everybody has a different experience. Like the blueprint of the brain is unique to each of us as well as our fingerprints. And I love this expressionism for those who are not necessarily creative or don't believe that they have the capacity to be creative. There are ethical considerations, and I must stipulate this is important. You can have seizures, and it's not epileptics that have the seizures. We don't really know why, but 0.03% to 3% of the global population possibly are non-epileptic but have seizures due to light. And I will show you this. An episode of Pokemon in Japan, 685 children hospitalized due to seizures, but only 24% of them had a history of seizures. So this shows you that there is the possibility that this can happen, and it's very important that I share this information because this isn't for everyone. So we do a screening. we make sure that everybody that comes to have this experience is screened beforehand, they're gently led into it, and you can see that for the safety of each one of those clients, we must make sure that none of these things we have. But there are amazing outcomes and possibilities. And I highly recommend you read my paper and go to my website. And if you have any questions, I'll be through there and I'm happy to answer anything. Thank you.